Hello, I'm Sebastian Michael, and this is this Saturday's Sonnet. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is a star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickles compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out into the edge of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. And this is the glorious Sonnet 116. If you have heard one sonnet in your lifetime, it is almost more likely to be this than any other. Even shall I compare thee to a summer's day may not be used quite as often as let me not to the marriage of true minds. Why? Because of course this Sonneteer is read over and over again at wedding ceremonies, and quite rightly so. There's a lot that can be said about this, and a lot that is argued about the exact meaning of Sonnet 116. Let me summarize into two very, very succinct pockets what they amount to. On the one hand, it can of course be read as a sonnet that describes what true love really is. And this is the way it is understood mostly when it is read out at weddings, when the newlyweds, the people who are just about to get married or who have just at that moment been married, are told what true love really is, that it is steadfast, it is the mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. And there are also people who will argue that there is a more differentiated, maybe a more subtle or a more complex reading to the sonnet, which says, well, actually, this is what's described here is something that cannot be attained, and that therefore it is quite a paradoxical sonnet. I'm not personally decided about which of these readings we want to accept, partly because, as with so many other things, the sonnet will of course speak to you and what you want to hear in it. It is of course partly your interpretation, but what is really, really interesting, of course, with this sonnet, as with all the others, is where in the sequence it stands and how does it come about that I, the poet, at this point, make such a clear declaration of what true love really is. And so let's briefly, as we normally do, look at how we got here, where we are at. We're in the penultimate batch. I keep using this word batch, it never quite sounds right to me, but I do these in batches of 7, as you may have noticed, and this is the penultimate batch. There's only one more lot of 7 to come within the fair youth sequence, and then we're on to the dark lady sequence. But we are very near the end now of the relationship between me, the poet, and the young man. And we know a few things that we've established. You can go over the other episodes and you will see how we got to here overall. We know that 3 years plus have passed. We know of the ups and downs. I will say this almost every time now. And now we have this, not so much declaration of love, but declaration of what true love really is and really means. Why? Let's have a quick look at how we got here. You may remember that in last week's episode, we discussed, on the one hand, the poet's apology in a way, saying, it's true, I have gone here and there and made myself a motley to the view. I have disgraced myself in a way. I have had worse essays than you have tried other people, and I have come to realize that you are of all my loves the best, and now all is done, have what shall have no end. That's what we talked about in some detail. And we also concluded last week's episode with the observation that your pity, you the young man's pity on me, will the impression fill that which vulgar scandal stamped upon my brow. So we were reminded of the vulgar scandal abroad. And I have a feeling that this vulgar scandal, this talk, the fact that this relationship is in people's eyes, in people's minds, and particularly in people's gossip, that I think is of great significance. Because what comes next? 113, since I left you, mine eye is in my mind. And then I continue to say how everything I see, my internal eye, compares to you, if you like, how there's a struggle between my external eye that sees things and how my internal eye always seems to recognize you. But this first line is really of extraordinary importance, since I left you. Now, we don't know whether this means that there has been a formal separation in the way that we would today say, I'm leaving you. I somehow doubt this. I somehow think this has more to do with a separation having taken place in the sense that I've gone away, or maybe I have taken a step back from the relationship. It's interesting that I say I left you, not you left me, or we decided to let it be for the time being. Clearly a kind of separation, either metaphorical or literal, has taken place. I'm going to skip 14 because that would take me quite a long time to explain to you what it means, and I don't want to lumber this episode with 114. 115, I say those lines that I have written before do lie, where I then go on to say that even though I have said before that I love you as much as I possibly can, that wasn't true, because I can love you still more. My love can still grow. Love is a babe. Then might I not say so, to give full growth to that which still doth grow. And I think here we are actually talking about love. We may also be once again making some suggestions and referring to some more mundane expressions of love. But I don't think we need to get too hung up about this here. What's interesting is that there has been the sequence of events, because we are looking at this as a story, and if these sonnets chart a story, there is an if there, we don't know for certain, but that's the premise at any rate. If they chart a story, then we have in these last few sonnets gone from me saying, of course it is true, I have been around, I've had sex with other people, of course I've been on tour, what have you, but I've come back to you and you are my best. I've also called you my home of love. And then now I say, since I left you, I still have you in my mind all the time. And now I'm here at number 116. And now, at this point in the proceedings, not at the very beginning when I set out to love you, not when we're in the flush both of our fresh affection for each other, not when we first meet, but now towards the end of our relationship, or at any rate towards the end of me writing about our relationship in these sonnets, here. And bear in mind all these things I've just said, because they really, really are important. This comes after me saying, yes, of course, I have slept around. This is after the time when I admonished you for having affairs with other people, including my mistress. This is after the ups and downs. And here I say, let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Now, what could these impediments be? We also have to bear in mind strongly that this is in the context of a relationship that is in the public eye. There has been vulgar scandal, there has been disgrace, there has been talk. And we are talking, after all, about an actor, playwright, and poet who already has a reputation. He's already known in London. He's not William Shakespeare, the icon of the English language that he is today, but he is already a known entity. And we have this young man whom we haven't strictly identified, but who we know is very, very close to the seat of power, very, very rich, very good looking, very young, but no longer quite as young as he was when they first met 3.5 or so years ago. if there is scandal, if there is vulgar scandal, let alone, about these two men, at a time when sexuality between men is really considered to be a mortal sin and can be punished by death. There's a strange, I mean, if you look at the context, the historical context, there's a strange, you could argue, hypocritical or double-sided attitude towards this sort of friendship between men that also had a physical aspect, that had a strong, passionate love, certainly. This existed all over the place. Even the new king, James I, had favourites at court, whom he acknowledged to be his favourites at court. So it's a very, very different cultural context, but still, there would be, quite conceivably, not only scandal but also danger in a relationship like this becoming so prominent as to be the talk of the town or the talk at court. And here, bearing in mind also that we are towards the end of this sequence, and we know that some of these sonnets have already been circulated and have already been mentioned elsewhere. So irrespective of when these sonnets are published, by the time this sonnet is written, we can assume quite safely that people in the world being London at that time, Shakespeare's world at that time being largely London, people in the world that matters to Shakespeare at the time know about these sonnets, and they certainly know about the young man, they certainly know about him, and they seem to also know about this particular friendship. And here I, the poet, say, let me not to the marriage, I use the word marriage, of true minds, admit impediments. And impediments is a word that's used in the marriage vows at the time, where the priest says, if anybody knows why these two should not be wed, if anybody knows of impediments, then let them speak now or forever hold their peace. So we have this one word, impediment, in the ceremony normally used in the singular, and the word marriage in the first two lines of this sonnet. It's like a public declaration, because what is a marriage, what is a wedding, other than a public declaration, a declaration before your family, your friends, your community, and before God, of your love. That's what a marriage is. You get married to vow to each other faithfulness. I have just said to the young man, now all is done, have what shall have no end. And you go into a church, or if you're not religious, you go in front of your congregation, and you declare and celebrate in public. It's a public act, even if it's a private act in terms of whom you invite. It's a public declaration of your togetherness, of you belonging together. What do I do at this point, at a moment in my relationship with this young man where there is scandal about, where there have been ups and downs, where I have admitted to my infidelities and where, what do? I say, let me not to the marriage. This is a marriage that we have here of two minds, admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds. So let's go into what does it mean, Sonnet 116. It's not very difficult to understand, and as before, I think this is a contributing factor why it is so very, very popular and so often read, and possibly also a little bit misunderstood at times, because we've only had equal marriage in parts of the world for less than a decade, I think. I mean, as I'm recording this now in 2016, I think in the UK we've had it for about a couple of years or so. Maybe I would have to check, but some states in the United States have had it for maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Some, I think, have only just got it very recently. There certainly are parts in the world that don't have it. There's a big discussion in Australia at the moment, should we have equal marriage. This is not a foregone conclusion. This is not a common thing. It certainly isn't a common thing in William Shakespeare's day. And even so, this declaration of a marriage between two minds, of two men, has been used at straight weddings for centuries without people even paying attention to the fact that what they're really reading is a celebration of the love between two men. What does it mean, Sonnet 116? Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Do not allow me, don't make me, don't think that I can admit impediments, admit obstacles, admit deficiencies, faults, obstacles to the marriage of true minds, to the coming together and being together and staying together for life, till death do you part. A marriage is a lasting thing. It's not supposed to be a thing of the season. Let me not admit to this marriage of two minds, admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds. You may be infatuated. I've admitted to this. A few sonnets ago I said, I have been here and there. Of course I have. That's nature. But real love, the love that makes you married to somebody, that allows you to marry someone, that kind of love does not alter when it alteration finds. In other words, it is not like a weather vane, it doesn't change. Even though over time we change, we grow older, our looks change, maybe our behavior changes, our attitude, the way we know each other changes, but love is firm. You could argue, of course, if you want to nitpick, that in order for love to be firm, it also has to alter, it also has to change. But in essence, at the core, love remains firm. It doesn't go about becoming different just because over time we change, because love finds alteration. The core of love, the substance, does not change. Or bends with the remover to remove. Bends is to change direction, is to be movable with the remover. So if the person who removes because they go away or because they remove their love, to also remove, love remains steady. It doesn't go away just because the other person has gone away, effectively. The implication is temporarily, because of course you cannot have a marriage that doesn't last, at least in terms of the intention, forever. And so if somebody removes themselves from the relationship, then if they're in a marriage, the assumption is that they will come back, as I have come back to you and as you have come back to me. Love remains the same, remains steady. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. Well, an ever-fixed mark for sailors is an important thing, because you are way before, some 400 years before sat-nav. You do not have electronic instruments. If you sail, you need fixed marks, you need reference points that you can rely on and that stay there and that look down on tempests. So no matter what the weather is doing, no matter how strongly the waves lap at a lighthouse, for example, it has to be steady. This mark has to be steady, otherwise it becomes unreliable. It's a mark, an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests. So there will be tempests, so the wind will blow, so there'll be big waves. So what? That's what true love is. It is the star to every wandering bark. Every wandering bark is every vessel, is every ship that may otherwise be lost. A wandering bark, again, if you're then away from the physical marks by the coast, you then need the stars, and the stars, like the North Star, for example, the fixed star, it would be a reference point, absolutely, for navigators whose worths are known. The star's worth is unknown. We don't really know what it is worth. We don't really actually know what it's made of. We do now, we think, but certainly then we didn't. But we can take its height. We can measure the angle at which it stands from where we are. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickles compass come. The bending sickles compass of time. Well, time is the scythe that cuts us all down. Eventually, we will all die. We all grow old. Everything goes to pot. The highest, tallest monuments will ultimately crumble. Everything will ultimately decline. Time is a scythe. It cuts things down. The bending sickle is the instrument with which time cuts us down. And even though rosy lips and cheeks, these things that we find so attractive when we fall in love, when we get infatuated with somebody who's incredibly good looking or who's extremely cute and sweet and has such incredibly kissable lips, you just can't resist them. That happens all the time, but that's not love. That's attraction, infatuation. That's our physical, emotional response to somebody who comes and goes. Love is not time's fool, the fool of time. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out into the edge of doom. Love doesn't change within this brief time that it has here. It doesn't last for a few hours or weeks. It doesn't, like other things, come and go. It bears it out into the edge of doom. Doom is the end of the world. It's the end of time. It's eternal love, real love. If this be error, and upon me proved, if I'm wrong about this, and it can be proved that I am wrong, I never writ, nor no man ever loved, then I have never written anything. If you can prove to me that I'm wrong about this, what I'm saying about love, then I have never actually written anything, and nobody, no man has ever loved. And there, of course, is the complication. Am I actually saying that clearly I have written, and clearly I have loved, and therefore this must be error? I don't think so. But I'm not going to impose my view on you. All I want to do with this vlog, with this video blog, and with this podcast is to give you the sonnets, maybe explain them a little bit to you, maybe give you some pointers to what they might mean, and certainly put them in context, and in the context of this extraordinary and extremely fascinating relationship. But am I the specialist here, the expert who can tell you with certainty what the reading is that we should adopt here? I think this depends really largely on you. If you're cynically inclined and quite world weary, and if you think that actually real love doesn't exist, then you might be inclined to read this as actually being a sonnet that expresses real love is unattainable. There are editors who say so. I mean, I've got an edition here where the notes about this particular sonnet say exactly that the sonnet talks about something that is unattainable. I don't personally feel it that way. I don't feel this sonnet to be that. Also, I am surrounded, of course, as everybody else is, by relationships that have ups and downs and have ups and downs, and then they end, and then a new relationship starts. Our way of conducting a relationship, especially with our life expectancy today and with our extraordinary freedom that we actually have, and which, of course, I do believe is a good thing. But for us, having a relationship that really lasts, certainly a romantic relationship that really lasts, and then it has to turn into something else anyway. If it is a romantic relationship, it has to turn into something else. That's very rare. But I also have examples in front of me of really profoundly close, lasting marriages that have lasted time. I mean, so much time that you think this is almost impossible, more than half a century. Very difficult to imagine that now. And then bear in mind also that, of course, the life expectancy, we mentioned this, well, for most people at the time Shakespeare writes, is not 80, 90, 100 years. It can happen, but it's extremely rare. So when you talk about a marriage that lasts until death do you part, you are really talking in the normal case about 30, 40 years, 20, 30, 40 years. But be that as it may, that's almost a side issue. Because of course I'm talking here, the poet, Shakespeare, I'm talking here about a marriage of true minds. Now, some people interpret this particular line as proof, positive, that we are talking about a platonic relationship, a relationship of minds. Well, this sonnet in isolation might suggest as much. It is a marriage of true minds he's talking about. But we know from other sonnets that we've read over the last weeks that this is not a platonic relationship. I would be foolhardy in the extreme, I think, to try and make this sonnet say something about the whole relationship that other sonnets have absolutely refuted. But it's worth bearing in mind that there is a possibility, and it's a strong possibility, that this particular sonnet is addressed not only to the young man, but also, since we are now in the public eye, to the public. It's a marriage, it's a public declaration. It's me, the poet, saying, I'm not going to allow this vulgar scandal, this slander, these wagging tongues to put forward impediments to what I and this person have, to what we, you and I have. Ours is a marriage of true minds. The rest I'm not even allowed to talk about because I've talked about it more than maybe many people would expect. But here, whatever else you might think. And it's kind of understandable that people would have some raised eyebrows because you're talking about these two very different people, different in terms of their age, different in terms of their status, different in terms of their wealth. It's not surprising that there would be raised eyebrows, that people would find this interesting. I mean, put this in the context of never even mind what the legality was at the time. Put this in the context of today. If you imagine who in your country is one of the most rich, somebody very, very close to the royal household, having a very close friendship with a pop star or a rapper of the day, who happens to be married, and everybody knows this, that would be in the tabloids, that would be talked about. There would be vulgar scandal, very vulgar scandal as it happens, because it would be in tabloids. So we can kind of understand that this would be talked about. And here I am doing something really quite extraordinary. That's why, of course, it's such an important sonnet. Also within the sequence, and also about this relationship, quite aside from the fact that it's such a popular, such a much loved sonnet, that people adopt it as something that expresses the nature of true love. Aside from that, it's a big statement. 400 years before equal marriage, William Shakespeare stands up and says, "Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediment." It could be read, I'm not arguing this, but it could be read as a political statement. I think, this is a contentious remark, and I would shy away from this because I don't think Shakespeare is overtly political, but I was watching a documentary just last night, coincidentally, in which Boy George, the pop star, talked about his youth and about how he became this figure, this iconic figure in the 1980s, who you may remember. And he concludes this documentary with the sentence, "Sometimes the most political act is just being yourself." I think therein lies the politics, if you like. I'm not suggesting for one moment that Shakespeare sat down and thought about this politically and actually made a determination to make a statement. But he makes a statement about himself, about the young man, and about the nature of their relationship. And he says, "You world have no right to put forward impediments. I will not admit them." We are at the point in the sequence where I make quite strong statements about the nature of our relationship and about you and your importance in my life. And these are no longer, you will notice, romantic verbages of sugar-coated beauty and what have you. They're quite serious declarations really about who we are and what we have. And that again is surely an indication of a relationship that has matured. And it could also well be an indication of the nature of this relationship now undergoing a final change. And this would make sense, of course, also in view of the fact that we are in the end phase of the Fair Youth sonnet. So, I'm a little bit sad to say that we only have 7 more Fair Youth sonnets to go. But then, after that, we have the whole of the Dark Lady sonnets to look forward to. So remember, love is the power, and see you next week.